Have you ever wondered why some countries just seem to work while others are always facing some kind of crises? Well, that is the huge question we're tackling today. Why do states face threats? We're going to look at all the challenges, both from the inside and the outside, that really shape how stable a country is. Let's get into it.
So, let's just start with a really basic question to get us going. Are all countries on Earth stable? I mean, it sounds simple, right? But the answer tells us a whole lot about the world we live in.
And this map, the Fragile States Index, pretty much gives us the answer right away. See, the darker the color, the more fragile the state is, which means it's more at risk of, well, falling apart. You can see pretty clearly that stability is definitely not something you can take for granted. A lot of countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, are dealing with immense pressure. We're talking everything from unfair legal systems to youth unemployment and political violence. All of that stuff adds up.
Okay, so where are all these threats actually coming from? The first place we're going to look is at threats from outside the normal system of countries. Terrorism and the groups behind it, what we call non-state actors.
All right, this is a big one. This is a key vocab term you are absolutely going to see on your AP exam, so let's get it right. Terrorism isn't just random violence. The most important part of this definition is that it's carried out by a non-state actor, so not a country's army, and the whole point is to use fear to achieve some kind of goal.
This slide is super helpful because it breaks down the official criteria. For something to be called terrorism, it has to check all three boxes in that first step. It has to be on purpose, involve violence, and it can't be a war between countries. But that's not all. It also has to meet at least two of the three criteria in the second step. It's this specific definition that lets experts analyze these events accurately.
So, this leads to a really crucial question, one that comes up all the time. What makes terrorism different from, say, an assassination of a political leader or a battle in a war?
And the answer, it all comes down to the target. The huge difference is that terrorists go after ordinary people on purpose. They view all citizens, not just soldiers or leaders, as legitimate targets. Why? Because they hold those citizens responsible for the actions of their government. That's what really separates it from other kinds of political violence.
And to put some names to this concept, here are some of the major non-state actors you should probably recognize. Of course, there's Al-Qaeda, who carried out the 9/11 attacks. The Islamic State, also called ISIS, which for a time actually controlled huge areas of Iraq and Syria. You've got groups like Nusrat al-Islam in West Africa, and of course the Taliban in Afghanistan.
All right, so we've talked about threats from the outside. Now let's kind of flip the script and look at threats that come from inside a state. This section is all about governance and sovereignty, basically how internal problems can make a country really unstable.
First things first, let's get our key terms down. Political geographers put governments into three main buckets. You have a democracy, where people get to elect their leaders, an autocracy, which is run for the benefit of the ruler, not the people, and then there's this one in the middle, an anocracy, which is kind of a mix of both. All right, quick pop quiz, just to make sure that one sticks. Based on what we just saw, what's the word for a country that's a blend of the two, not quite one or the other?
And the answer is anocracy. If you got that, nice job. These are often countries that are going through a big change, or where there's a serious power struggle, which can make them pretty unstable.
Now let's see how this actually looks on a world map. This shows democracies in blue, autocracies in red, and those anocracies we just talked about are in purple. You can see these clear geographic patterns right away, can't you? Understanding why these types of governments cluster together, like all the red in parts of Asia and the Middle East, is so important for understanding global politics.
So that map gives us a snapshot in time. But what about the trend over the years? What's been the biggest change in how countries are run, especially since around the 1980s?
And boom, this graph tells the story perfectly. Just look at that blue line for democracies. See that massive spike starting in the late 80s? That's directly tied to the end of the Cold War and the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. And at the exact same time, look at the red line, autocracies. It just takes a nosedive.
Okay, another massive internal threat is what we call contested sovereignty. And the classic example here is the Korean Peninsula. Ever since World War II, it's been split into two countries, North and South Korea. It's a perfect case study of one ethnic group, Koreans, living in two totally different and opposing political states.
And these sovereignty disputes can also be about territory. Literally, who gets to control a piece of land? What you're looking at here is a Taiwan Coast Guard ship near a tiny island that China also says belongs to them. Both sides have historical claims to it, and that creates a really tense, ongoing conflict in the East China Sea.
So all of this brings us to our final section, and we're zooming all the way out to the global scale. How do countries deal with all these threats? Well, a lot of the time, they team up. They form alliances to stay safe and to project their power around the world.
A core concept you need to know here is the balance of power. This is just a situation where opposing countries, or alliances of countries, have about the same amount of strength. The thinking is that this equality keeps any one side from just dominating everybody else, which, in theory, makes the world a bit more stable, even if it's tense.
And you absolutely can't talk about a balance of power without mentioning the Cold War. It created what we call a bipolar world, split between two massive military alliances. On one side, you had NATO, with the United States and its allies, and on the other, you had the Warsaw Pact, led by the Soviet Union.
But of course, alliances don't stay the same forever. After the Warsaw Pact fell apart, NATO had to figure out its new role. It started expanding east, and pretty controversially, it included a lot of those old Warsaw Pact countries. Then, more recently, Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 really kicked NATO's original defensive mission back into high gear, leading countries that were neutral for decades, like Finland and Sweden, to finally join up.
And that brings us full circle, right back to where we started. We began with this idea of fragile states, and this quote is a powerful reminder of why all these different concepts, terrorism, governance, alliances, really matter. When these threats come together, they have very real consequences, and they hit some parts of the world, like sub-Saharan Africa, a lot harder than others.
So what's the big picture here? If you're going to take away one thing, it's this. Threats to states are never simple. They are messy and complicated. They come from non-state groups, from a country's own internal problems, from arguments over who owns what land, and from the never-ending chess game of global power.
And that leaves us with one final question to think about. The Cold War was clearly a bipolar world, two main superpowers. But today, with the rise of China as a true global superpower, a lot of people are saying we're heading into a totally new era. What do you think that new balance of power is going to look like? That's the question that will define geopolitics for your generation, and it's one geographers are going to be studying for a long, long time. Thanks for joining this explainer.